Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. Hi, everybody, and welcome to All Things LGBTQ. We have with us today three authors, but and you authored, Gail, with this book with somebody else, correct?
Yes, I co-edited it with Ada.
Yeah.
Malone. Yeah.
Okay. So, Gail, Marlene Schwartz paints a picture of complex human relationships, a family found, formed, and chosen, and the ways that people find strength and meaning in their lives despite unexpected terms. She has very human characters finding their way just as we might be doing. A family with two moms, and this is your first book, and sons seems pretty ordinary to many Americans in 2025. This is your new book. But with the re-election of Trump, the rise of Christian nationalism, and the ultra-conservative Supreme Court, queer moms face ongoing and accelerating challenges to their family's boyhood. Reimagined asks particular questions about parenting and feminism during a time when traditional male dominance continues to shape social expectations. So you ask a lot of questions here, Gail, and you're also the author of 4 other books: Clementine in Quarantine, The Loudest Bark, My Sister's Girlfriend, and Falling Through the Night, correct?
Correct.
Okay, good. And you have a lot of honors. You were the finalist of a Tilly Olson Short Story Award, and One Woman's Search for Sanity. Her writing has been appeared in Room Magazine Online, Witty Bitches. I love that name. Wild Magazine, and Poetica Magazine. So, hi, everybody, and welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi. So, I guess for you first, Gail, how did you get this idea for an anthology? Did it come after your writing of Falling Through the Night?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started that project before my son was even born, sort of the seeds of it. But once he was in the world, my friend who writes under the name Ada Malone and we were just thinking about this very unique situation of parenting boys as queer women and what it means and our unique perspective. And, we shared stories about farting and swords and, Minecraft and Pokemon, all this stuff that we just had no frame of reference for. None. We both tend more on the feminist side of the spectrum, and we would be sort of throwing up our metaphorical hands about, like, what do we do with these boys, and laughing and kind of crying, and just seeing all the queer women around us parenting. And she was an academic. She was a professor at a college for a long time, and we both done a lot of research on the topic. And there's been a lot of research, and the findings are the question being, are boys raised by women alone, whether queer women or single women, are they okay? And the answer is an overwhelmingly yes. They're even better. They're more than okay. So we didn't want to ask that question, but what we were curious about is, what's unique and special and interesting about boys that are growing up with queer women, especially feminist queer women? What makes our feminist parenting particular? And does that positively help shape our boys' healthy sense of masculinity?
Yes.
So, but that's like very, very academic. It really started with the farting. Like, it really started with that, and the sword, and just like being loving stories and wanting to share stories in the service of this idea of, like, wanting to help create healthy masculinity. And I'm still not clear what that means or what that looks like, but I think the book starts asking that question in the form that I think is the most powerful, which is storytelling.
Yeah. And what are the ages, the various ages of the sons in your book?
Big span. We have little guys, like I think maybe 2, and I think it goes up to mid-30s.
Okay. And
so as Robin says, they are grown ass men.
And did they? How did they feel about being in the book? Okay.
Not only did they feel okay, but Sam, who is Robin's youngest, wrote the foreword. He felt so strongly about it when we approached him, and he's a writer. He's a wonderful writer, and he was very excited about that. And that piece is actually going to get printed up in one of the local papers in, I think, Marin County. So it's very exciting. Yeah. So that his piece actually sort of introduces the book, Sam Waterstone.
Yeah. And so your stories, this is a time when they really need to be, when masculinity first needs to be looked at, and a time when so much oppression of the LGBTQ and BIPOC community is under attack. So we need community more than ever. Mm-hmm. And, linking these stories to just another community of women raising young boys, older boys. How did it turn out? How do you do it? What did people do that was successful or not successful? I don't know if there's any stories that relate to, because unfortunately I haven't been able to see the book because it just came out, right?
Yeah, we're still waiting on.
I know. So I'm kind of going with a wing and a prayer here, but you can fill me in. So is there any stories like about what didn't work and what people did to try to correct that?
Maybe before we do that, maybe we just bring in Marie and Irina, because I think the 3 of us will have a lot more collective memory than just me. There's lots of messiness in the collection, so for sure. But
so let's introduce our other guests now, and they can tell us who they are and how they found out about what you were doing and how they got involved. So please.
Irina, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Irina Gonzalez. I'm a journalist and also actually right now getting my master's in social work with the aim of becoming a therapist. And how I got involved is Gail and I connected on Substack, which I think has been a really great place to find this kind of writing. There's been, that's a platform that, whatever you think of the owners and founders necessarily, it has been a really great platform for, I think, diverse voices and finding community in a way that I think a lot of us remember Twitter being for writers, like way back when we first joined. I write a newsletter. Well, I haven't written it a little bit, but I write a newsletter called Parenting in Hard Mode, which is about, parenting as a neurodivergent, queer, BIPOC parent. And I shared the essay that, ended up being in the book, and Gail and I connected, and, reading some of these other stories has been really exciting too. I think it's really lovely to find this kind of community, especially as you said, during this time right now.
Yeah. And how old is your son?
In the story I tell in the book, he actually had just turned 4, but he just turned 5 this past March. So.
Okay. And Marie?
Yeah, I'm Marie Holmes. I am a freelance journalist right now and a writer, and I'm mom of 2 kids with my wife here in New York City. My son is now 15. He's going to be 16 in July, which is absolutely crazy. And in the essay, I guess he's like 7 or 8, maybe. Um, yeah, and I saw online somewhere, I saw a call for submissions for this anthology a while ago, and I thought, this is something that my wife and I are grappling with all the time, right? We want to give our kid the freedom to be exactly who he is, which is sometimes, these very stereotypical boy things like the swords, and that with my son Max, it's been sticks. Like, just he loves just hitting things with sticks constantly. Um, so we're kind of like, what's up with that? Because we can't quite relate to it. But we also want him to grow up to be a kind, empathic, feminist man, right?
Yep.
So there's this constant tension there that we're always trying to negotiate. And it was really wonderful to read the other contributions in the book and see that other queer women, and I think, all feminist women too, are constantly questioning ourselves when it comes to our parenting. And we're all just kind of in this space of trying to figure it out and reacting to the toxic masculinity that the world is throwing at us, and which has been, shifting a lot since I was younger.
And there's a lot of books out. Well, not a lot, but I've been reading some books about how boys are failing in this culture.
Mm-hmm.
More women are going to college.
Yeah.
More young girls are doing much better in school. That boys tend to be more lonely and isolated and more susceptible to, stuff that maybe not be so good. So how did you moms deal with those kind of issues? Do you talk about it a lot, or do you just confront it when it comes up, or how are you doing it?
I think in our case, like, if I'm not going to characterize all lesbian relationships, but the ones that I have been in always involve a lot of communication, right?
Yeah.
There tends to be like a hyper amount of communicating going on between two sensitive feeling women, right?
Right.
And our son has grown up in the midst of this. So he has seen both of us constantly, like really constantly, talking things out, right? Talking about how we feel, talking about what we want, trying to negotiate, living this shared life together. And we have really tried to model for him and to show him that it's okay to talk about how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to name how we think you're feeling when you're really little. Like, oh, I see you're really angry. What's going on? What do why did you throw the truck, or whatever it is? And at this point, my son is going to be 16, and it's almost kind of a joke. He's like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about how I'm feeling. Like, or I'll ask him something will happen at school, and I'll be like, oh, what are your thoughts on? He's like, oh my God, you sound like a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think he's had, in a way, a very sort of stereotypical upbringing among hyper communicative queer women, right? Yeah. And that's impacted him. And we'll see what he thinks about it as he becomes an adult, but I think it's definitely had an impact.
Yeah. My sons used to say to me, oh, Mom, I wish you would just spank us like other moms and stop talking. So,
It's so funny.
There is a little of that, and so, I mean, this is such a hard time, I think, to navigate. I think when my kids were growing up, it was more actually, it was in the 80s, and it wasn't a great world then, but it didn't have the complications. I mean, that we seem to have now in terms of, this whole going back to white males being, the the dominant force in the culture. I mean, it's got to be, the messages have got to be really hard, and all the incel groups and, stuff that I guess were there, but I didn't notice until the computer and communication on computer really became what people were using to get information. So given that, do you see your books being banned in Alabama or Texas or Florida? Libraries not taking them? Are you trying to get them into like school libraries, places where young people can read maybe and feel they're not alone if they're the child of queer parents?
I think it's an adult audience, really.
Okay.
So it's not something that we're really looking at. But I mean, I fully expect it's going to be banned. I mean, my feelings about what's coming are pretty dire. But let me just go back a little bit to what you were talking about from this idea of the masculine and the fact that the girls are starting to do better. I think as I've gone through the publication process, I've been thinking a lot about the place of masculinity in Western culture. And I think there's a big void right now. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of young men are gravitating over to the right. I think they're not seeing, and I'm not even framing this in terms of men or boys. I'm talking really about masculinity. Like,
Yeah.
what is it particularly about masculinity that's valuable to our culture? How can we take that, the sword, the stick, all of that sort of energy, and how can we place it in a positive way? And I think that's an open question. I think we have not figured that out. And I think people always think it's better to be bad than to be invisible. And I think that's why we're seeing this gravitation of boys over to the right, because that's all they're seeing. They're not seeing, what do I do with my masculinity that's good? They're just saying there's one option.
Right.
Because the other option is to feel ashamed, and I think shame doesn't promote morality. It just promotes rage. I mean, that's not a good choice for anybody. And I think a lot, like we on the left have gotten some of that wrong. I think we've used shame in a way that has been counterproductive.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? My son is 5, so these are still kind of new things we're navigating. But something I thought about this even before, having a child, but something I think about a lot is how, in the 80s, the 70s, like certainly in the 90s, and now, feminism has brought so much conversation into what a strong girl looks like and how a girl can embrace her, masculine qualities or more masculine things, and I write about this a little bit in my piece, like girls can wear pants, but boys aren't allowed to wear skirts. And I think that a big, big, big oversight, of feminism has been the acknowledgement that feminism benefits everyone, and that if we are telling girls that they can be strong and they can be masculine and they can be, have those qualities, but we're not saying to boys that they can have feminine qualities, that's where the loss is, because we've been building up all of these girls for so long, for decades, right? And like, I'm a product of that. And I, when I imagined having kids, I imagined like, I'm going to raise a strong little girl, just like I was. But I struggled a little bit in the very beginning when I found out I was having a boy, because I was like, I don't know how to raise a feminist boy. And I realized it's because we've never had, as a society, conversations about what does it look like for a boy to both be strong and play with sticks and want to wear a pink shirt and be okay with crying. The whole like boys can't cry is still such a huge part of the dialogue. And that to me is like one of the core things that needs to change for boys and men to be more, to feel more integrated into society, because I think that we acknowledge and revere girls that can kind of walk that line and be both or either, however, but we don't really, we've never given that ability or power to boys. And, so of course they grow up thinking, well, I can't cry, I can't be emotional. And, being a boy and being strong and aggressive is shaming. So they don't have anywhere else to go. They don't have other options.
Mhm.
And, I think that becomes such a big loss because, these young boys that are going into like incels or white supremacist groups, it's where they feel they belong because it's the only place where they're being told, here is a pocket of how you can be accepted and be okay. And we're not saying that, like we're not saying that as a society. We're not like we're not saying that as queer women, as feminists, like any of that. And I think that to me is really the biggest loss is we haven't built up our boys because we haven't told them that they can be different, just like girls can be different.
And I think, there's a lot, um, well, like, I know when my kids were going to school, and yours probably still, depending on where you live, more or less. But, you go to school and you have queer moms or you have queer dads or whatever. There's still going to be like some kind of stigma attached to that by a certain population of school-aged boys. And, so I think navigating all this is very brave of all of you and all of us. But I think you're right. It's extremely difficult because we don't have a like, okay, you can be Batman, but but there's no real role models for what it is to be masculine male and not be destructive or not be hurtful to the women around you. I think it's a huge task and very hard to navigate. So who do you envision your audience to be? Adults as or other women giving help and nourishment to other women who are in the same category as you're in about raising boys?
I can take that. I think initially I was anticipating the audience being other queer moms. And interestingly, of the friends, I don't have that many friends who have read it, but two friends, one of them's non-binary, bisexual, the other is gay man, and then a friend of a friend. These men literally had like almost the same words. They read the book, they said they cried, and they said they mourned the childhood that they wished they could have had.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really interesting to me. I have another friend who's a trans man who is also a parent of a son and was absolutely fascinated and inspired as a new man, embracing a different kind of masculinity, thinking about how does he want his son to grow up and how does he want to model masculinity for his son. So that was a perspective from a male perspective. I mean, it was really not on my radar. So I'm shifting in terms of who I think the audience could be lots and lots of different demographics, but certainly men included. And I hadn't really counted on that. I think men have a lot to are responding to the stories.
Good. That's interesting. Well, especially, like if they were young and gay, I mean, they had to find their place in the world and in some very dark places also, I'm sure. So, and I was talking earlier about the Netflix Innocence, which was about a teenage boy who kills a girl classmate, and I just thought it was incredible. There were some parts that I didn't really like. Each day was done at once, one time. But the agony of raising someone who you love and adore, who ends up killing this young girl because she rejects him. And how, and he's only 13. And so your heart breaks for him in a certain way, but more so for the family and those surrounding him. So I just thought it was pretty interesting. I'd be interested if anybody saw it. I guess nobody has on the panel, but at some point you might want to look into it. It's very dark, but I think worthwhile.
Yeah. I have it saved. It's actually called Adolescence.
Yeah, Adolescence. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, I have it saved. I keep meaning to make time to watch it, but I know it's dark, so I've been like,
yeah.
I need to like be in the right mindset.
Yeah, it is. It is very hard to watch. And but so does anybody have a 5 minute or so snippet they'd like to read for me or for our audience?
Sure, I can read a little bit.
Great.
Should I just start?
Sure.
Okay. So the title of my essay is Walking While Female, What I Want My Son to Know. I can take my shirt off too, my daughter asks. It's July, and we're on one of the shaded paths in the park, the trees' green leaves dappled with sunlight. She's 3 years old, and she's watching her 7-year-old brother tear down the hill in his swim trunks, shirtless. We've been creating and destroying water balloons at the playground, the kids slapping them satisfyingly against the fragrant black asphalt faster than I can tie the ends of new ones into knots around my fingers. Usually, I have them both in rash guards, pink for her, blue for him, a product of hand-me-downs and, ostensibly, their own preferences. But today Max has been inspired to feel the air on his skin, and Olive wants the same. I feel a familiar twist in my gut. Of course, I say, my smile forced. Olive steps towards me, arms raised in a double salute, and I pull the stretchy fabric over her head. She takes off running after her brother. We haven't even gotten all the way down the hill before Olive's bare chest catches someone's attention. You're not allowed to go around like that, they say to her, though the comment is clearly intended for me. In my memory, the speaker is a man, but they could just as easily have been a woman. I must look at this person, I think. Do I smile? I do remember that my reaction was to ignore them. What did they say? Asks my son. He understands immediately the unfairness of his being able to go topless while Olive cannot. I tell him it's called a double standard, when things are okay for one group of people, but not another. There are a lot of them for girls, I say. My daughter wants her shirt back on. My nonchalance hasn't fooled her. She doesn't want that kind of attention from strangers or from anyone.
Wow, that is incredible. That is really, really beautiful. Thank you for reading that.
Of course.
And it is such a, such an everyday thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so powerful in what privileges we have and what we don't. And I like that you said it's a double standard. It was really a good way of answering that question. So, Gail, when is the book coming out?
Sorry, I was on mute. The launch
Your
date,
book.
the launch
Yes.
date is June 3rd, which is on Tuesday of next week.
And it's called Boyhood Reimagined.
Yep, stories of queer moms raising sons.
And we will have a picture of the book, and if you let us know where they might order this book, we'll flash it across the bottom of the screen.
Great. Yeah, I can get you. You can order directly from the publisher, Motina Books, but it's also available at bookshop.org and the major chain that shall not be named.
Yeah. Really? Is
I'm-
there?
Yes. I'm trying so hard to avoid any dealing with that or company.
I know, but it's almost impossible.
It's close to impossible. But
Yeah, I don't. My poetry book was on there too, and I'm sort of like, oh.
yeah.
But what are you going to do?
Well,
So anyway, we won't name them.
Bookshop.org is a really wonderful alternative.
Yeah.
And I did write to Amanda at Bear Pond, so I'm hoping that she might
Good.
consider having it available there as well.
Yes, our local author.
Yeah.
So does anybody have any more questions or anything they would like to add to what we've gone over so far?
Do we have time for Irina to read a little? I don't know.
Yes, we do.
Sure. All right. Kind of deciding. I'm going to read from a particular section. So my essay is called "Where Are the Princess Shirts for Boys?" And there's a few sections, but I'm going to read from a middle section called "Why Can't Boys Like Female TV Characters?" All right. I think we can all agree that, in general, our society is okay with teaching girls that boy things are okay for them too. This isn't true for conservative circles, sure, but only the most extremist people insist that today's girls and women have to wear skirts and dresses. Women may not have bodily autonomy in the US, thanks to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but at least we can wear pants. When I walk down the children's clothing aisles, everything is still very gendered when it comes to the colors and styles of clothes. But DC Comics makes a girl's Batman shirt, so we know that it's okay for girls to like male characters in what has traditionally been considered a boy interest, superheroes. Overall, it's not that difficult these days to find female gendered clothing that feature both female and male characters, or even just male characters in popular kids' television series, a la any kind of superhero. But try searching for a boy's shirt from Frozen, a favorite movie of my son's, and you'll find a gray shirt featuring Olaf. And while I think the silly snowman is adorable, why can't I find a boy's Frozen shirt that features, I don't know, the two actual leading characters of the movie, Elsa and Anna, without featuring also two male characters? It seems that the only option for male children who love female-led movies and TV is to buy from the girls section of the clothes. And while I know that using boy and girl in this context is problematic, I also know that this is the reality we live in. Every store tells us to pick a side to shop based not on what our child likes, but on what it says on their birth certificate. Deconstructing all of this is important for sure, but in the meantime, we need to start teaching boys that it's awesome that their favorite character from Moana is Moana and not the chicken or the demigod. If a girl's Moana shirt can solely feature a secondary male character, then why can't a boy's Moana shirt feature solely the leading character who happens to be female? This is endlessly frustrating to me. And it's all coming to a head right now because my child's birthday party is coming up, and I cannot find a themed birthday shirt for him that features his favorite character from Paw Patrol. Why? Because she happens to be a girl. So all the shirts featuring her say birthday girl. Birthday girl. Why can't it just be birthday pup, which is only available for the primary female character? Or why can't it be something that doesn't bring gender into this at all? I'm not even saying birthday person because that might look a bit odd on a kid's birthday shirt, but a simple, it's my first birthday on a shirt that features the secondary female pup would suffice.
Thank you. I've had that dilemma too, and I think it's really important to point it out and to feel like as a mother you have this dilemma, right? Like like what do you do? So
yeah,
I appreciate
I
it.
have to say in the essay that I bought the birthday girl shirt and I just used some like glitter or like gel fabric paint and changed it to birthday kid,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is. And it is true. I think that girls in at least that way have more choices.
Mm-hmm.
They can wear pants, they can wear guys' t-shirts, they can wear men's shirts, they can, wear men's pajamas. I mean,
Yeah.
but the crossover needs to be, as we know,
Hmm.
more
Yeah.
liberal on the other end. Yeah.
I think about that a lot too. And I go into this in my essay, like, what does it say to boys that there is no, appreciation of female characters? Like, why are boys, when they feel rejected by a woman, turning to incel culture? Because when they're little, we're not telling them like, hey, Moana is amazing. You should wear a Moana shirt.
Yeah.
We're not revering female characters the way, we have for girls with male characters.
Well, it's been an argument, and I don't know whether people are in agreement with that, but it's okay for girls to emulate boys because they're moving up in status. If you're a boy and you want to do girl things, you're moving down in status. And so that is really where that primary balance comes from. And how we deal with that, I don't know. So I hope this book helps people navigate all those pitfalls of parenting, girls and boys, but
Yeah.
So does anybody else, Gail, do you want to give us a little more of a synopsis about the book and how many chapters there are and how many people wrote and anything like that?
We have, I think there's 13 essays and 5 interviews.
Okay.
And we also have illustrations, which is very exciting, color illustrations. And the interviews are particularly interesting because some of the core members of the writers actually conducted the interviews. So there's some of our commentary mixed in with the interview text, which is a little bit different in what you might find in some anthologies. And I think that, the range of topics is that there's one mom who was talking about her 10-year-old son, coming upon her 10-year-old son's web browser history and finding out that he had discovered porn, and how they deal with that, how she and her partner sat down thoughtfully and had a conversation. They tried not to shame. Another was talking about shaving her legs and her son kind of coming into that and talking about that. Another person was talking about the way she talks about feminism, being on a soapbox, and how she wonders if that's really the right approach. There's a lot of questioning. Something that I saw across the board of, I would have to say, every single essay had some piece of this idea of honoring our boys' vulnerable sides and respecting their choices around their bodies, around consent, around their capacity to protect themselves and to be separate from their parents. And there's a sort of respect theme that's woven throughout. And I think that that's something that can be a role model. And I think often we don't respect children. We don't respect their autonomy. There's one parent in the book that talks about her son not wanting to hug and kiss grandma, and honoring that in the family and saying, you don't have to hug and kiss grandma. You can say, I'd like to greet grandma in a different way. And so that's not something that, typically a parent will say, go on, kiss grandma. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
But again, you think about what message that's sending to someone who's small and who has less power. Well, our sons are going to have more power later, and their relationship to consent and their relationship to power is shaped through how they interact with their parents. So
yeah,
that's an interesting thread.
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting the book, and I hope that everybody in our audience gets the book. I think it's good for you, whether you have sons or not, and whether you have friends who have sons in which you participate in their raising, whether you're an aunt or an uncle or anybody else who has contact with many of these young boys. I think it's really important. So thank you so much, Gail, for doing this book. And we will see you again soon.
And thanks to Irina and Marie and all the other contributors, and as well as Diane Windsor, our publisher at Motina Books.
And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.